Ready to start your ESG journey? Get going today with Social Suite, and you could start reporting publicly in 30 days. With investor pressure mounting and regulations just around the corner, there's never been a better time to start your ESG reporting. Social Suite takes the complexity out of environmental, social, and governance reporting. Social Suite helps organizations to measure, monitor, and report on their progress with fast, simple, and affordable software. Create value through ESG in order to raise capital, improve brand and reputation, as well as mitigate risk. Social Suite has helped almost 100 micro to small cap companies report on ESG, with some starting their baseline report in under 60 minutes and reporting publicly within 30 days. ESG is a lot easier than you think, and you're probably already doing it. So take your sustainability reporting to the next level with measurable progress. Start your ESG journey today with Social Suite, an ESG software company for micro to small caps. Visit socialsuitehq.com. That's social, SUITEHQ.com to learn more. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not provided as financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or an offer to buy or sell any securities or make any investment. The views expressed by guest speakers are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement thereof by SNN or its affiliates. SNN expressly disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this podcast. My guest on the show today is Greg Reid, President and CEO of Kraken Robotics. It's a publicly traded company. I got two symbols for you: PNG on the TSX Venture and KRKNF on the OTCQB. Kraken Robotics Inc. is a marine technology company providing complex subsea sensors, batteries, and robotics systems. Their high-resolution 3D acoustic imaging solutions and services enable clients to overcome the challenges in our oceans safely, efficiently, and sustainably. Kraken Robotics is headquartered in Canada and has offices in North and South America and Europe. Kraken is ranked as a top 100 marine technology company by Marine Technology Reporter. Since I first interviewed Greg back in 2017, the company has grown to the point of announcing on January 12, 2023, they expect to report $40 million in 2022 revenue, up 56% year over year. I wanted to invite Greg on to better understand the inflection points resulting in revenue growth, geopolitical tailwinds, commercial opportunities outside their core defense customer base, and Greg's 3 to 5 year vision for Kraken Robotics. Kraken Robotics will also be presenting at our upcoming investor conference, the Planet MicroCap Showcase Vegas, happening on April 25 through 27, 2023. Registration is complimentary, so you can do so at www.planetmicrocapshowcase.com. And with that, please enjoy my conversation with Greg Reid, President and CEO of Kraken Robotics. Greg, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
Bobby, excellent. Much appreciate getting back to chat with you again. It's been quite a while.
That's for sure. It's been a long time, and I'm thankful that you took an hour out of your day to come. Let's get the full update on what's been going on at Kraken, and just for folks to know too. If you're interested in meeting Greg in person, they're actually Kraken's going to be presenting at our upcoming conference in Las Vegas, the Planet MicroCap Showcase, April 25 through 27, 2023. To register for that, to meet Greg, go to planetmicrocapshowcase.com. End of shameless plug. Back to us, Greg. So, like I said, I've known the company forever. We've done some short form interviews in the past at other conferences. And, the company has really started to hit some of those marks that, we publicly talked about in those interviews and that you've have made goals for yourself over the years. So, I really wanted to take some time and do a full kind of wrap for those that don't know the Kraken story and how you got to where you are today and where you want to go in the future. But to start, for those that haven't seen an interview, never heard of Kraken Robotics, or have no idea about underwater drones or technology, anything like that, what would you say is the one line that best describes Kraken Robotics?
We would be we'd be a defense technology company focused on the underwater robotics domain. And what we do is we provide both very high resolution sensors and underwater batteries and robots that allow our customers to be able to find very small objects on the seafloor at long ranges. So we're a dual use technology as well. So I mentioned that defense is a large part of our business, but also we provide services to the offshore wind and the offshore oil and gas market. Again, looking for small objects on the seafloor or being able to show images of things that are buried underneath the seafloor.
Looking back at Kraken's history, when was the company founded, and what would you say was the original thesis for its founding?
Yeah, the company was founded in 2012, so 10-year plus old company now. And originally founded on a sensor technology called synthetic aperture sonar. The acronym is SAS. And in effect, this was technology that had been worked on in the military. And Carl Kenny, our founder, had gone to NATO and talked to them about what were some of the upcoming technologies, which were still very expensive, very hard to use military technologies, but would add great value to customers that are operating in the ocean. And so synthetic aperture sonar was where the company was really founded. And typically that meant selling a $500,000 sonar to put on somebody else's underwater vehicle. And by default, that meant that other people had to sell underwater vehicles first before we had our own sales. So as we grew over time, we started to move up the value chain. And we found a variety of companies that really liked our sonar and were putting them on our underwater vehicles. And then we had some customers come to us and say, you guys are really good at the sonar side of the business. You've integrated on a lot of underwater robots or underwater drones. Can you build us a complete underwater robot or underwater drone? And that effort really started in 2015 and resulted in our first underwater product, our own complete system called the Catfish. The first delivery was in 2018. So the Catfish today is a key driver of our business. And what it meant is we were going from selling a $500,000 piece of equipment to selling about a $5 million fully integrated underwater drone with the launch and recovery equipment, predominantly to militaries around the world.
Absolutely. I mean, remind me, when exactly did you come to the company? Because I know Carl founded it, and then
I started in 2015.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So I started as the CFO and have over time moved in the COO role and then the president and CEO role just at the beginning of this year.
So I mean, 8 years ago when you first started out, I mean, was evolving from kind of the $500,000 add-on, so to speak, to now fully integrated, minimum $5 million type plus product that your clients are looking for. I mean, it sounds like that wasn't the original goal. You kind of just evolved with what the market was asking for.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of eventually we knew we wanted to move further up the value chain, but it was a matter of how we get there and how far up the value chain that we go. But ultimately, you're right. Customers came to us and said, are you capable of doing this? Because they saw gaps in the solutions they were getting from other people in the market. And our whole value proposition to date has provided leading edge technology at commercial off the shelf prices, as opposed to military prices from large defense contractors, which are much more expensive than our equipment, and in many cases you're getting similar performance. So so customer driven. What's really changed since I joined in 2015. We were 20 employees back then. Today we're around 250 employees. But really, on the defense side of the business, geopolitics has obviously had a big impact on the market. Not only was there an existing upgrade cycle happening in the underwater space, but then you layer on the fact that you've got all these geopolitical hotspots, whether it's the South China Sea, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's the, Russia, Ukraine, and the Black Sea, and even the Arctic today is becoming, as the ice melts and ocean lanes, shipping lanes open up, you've got increased I'll call it competition for resources and land in certain geographies. So all these things play into countries and navies wanting to have the latest and greatest equipment, wanting to be able to protect their national interests. And that's on the defense side. And then if you think about the commercial side of the world, you have things, everything from subsea pipelines to 1 million+ kilometers of subsea fiber optic cable that is out there, which, the average Joe didn't know too much about it. And the Nord Stream pipeline and other events like that have shone a light on that. So overall, the end market is seeing a lot more activity, and this is a part of them. This is an industry that is very challenging in the sense, from a technology point of view, to be able to put things deep in the ocean. So what that means is the barriers to entry are pretty high, which means your margins are pretty good. And we don't have 20 competitors; we have a handful of competitors. So just to give you a little bit about the operating environment, going underwater is very hostile in the sense that your GPS denied, pressure is intense, you have corrosion, battery life is a key issue for these underwater vehicles, and then communication, limited bandwidth with long delays. So it's much easier to stick a rocket in outer space or communication satellite in outer space and operate it than it is to stick this type of technology to the depths of the ocean. And in addition, trying to draw the parallel between outer space and the underwater domain, we know very little about our oceans, and have mapped a very small amount of our oceans today, especially in high resolution, almost none in high resolution. And that's not necessarily the case in outer space. Our budgets overall in the industry are just a teeny fraction of what's been happening in the outer space domain. And but eventually that things are starting to open up more and more. The underwater domain is starting to get more attention from a budgeting point of view. Now, from an investor point of view, we're hopeful that companies like ourselves and other companies in the underwater domain, there's a few public companies, as we get increased exposure and people better understand what the opportunity is there, that companies like us will get increased attention in the investment community.
That you bring up a really interesting point. I mean, you've said a lot of really interesting points there, but this one hit on my next question a little bit, and that has to do with the idea how there hasn't been as much paying attention to underwater, and then and thinking about that from a defense perspective. I mean, obviously, we all think of submarines and all that stuff. So obviously, most developed nations have, a navy in some respects. But that's still interesting to hear that there isn't as much, or it sounds like that's starting to change a little bit. So that's new information to me. I had no idea about that.
Yeah. So I mean, if you look, a lot of people don't realize that there's something like 500,000 underwater mines in naval inventories. There is a lot of leftover if you go to the Baltic and the North Sea and in Europe. There's a lot of leftover munitions that from the Second World War that have been dumped on the ocean floor. And so as you're building offshore wind farms and you're building subsea pipelines and subsea power cables that connect those offshore wind farms, that knowing what's on the sea floor and knowing what's underneath the sea floor is is increasingly of importance, and that is just without bad actors. If you add in bad actors that are then trying to beat up some of that infrastructure or destroy some of that infrastructure, it obviously places a greater emphasis on being able to inspect that infrastructure and have greater awareness. So from a national security point of view, just think what happens with if a sea lane like like the Malacca Straits or the South China Sea or the Persian Gulf, if any of those sea lanes ever got blocked off for a period of time, it would have huge impact on trade and huge impact on businesses. And obviously, with underwater pipelines exploding or being destroyed, that there's significant impacts on resources and economies. And just imagine if major subsea pipeline, major fiber optic cables got destroyed, what the impact would be on the global economy.
So with everything that you just said, I mean, that, case in point, I guess you'd say that in early December, Kraken announced a $50 million contract with the Royal Canadian Navy for a mine hunting program. So, I mean, have you been seeing more of more interest on this side of the business, in these types of contracts on the military, on the defense side, or has it been kind of a balance between military and on the commercialization side?
Yeah, it's the offshore wind. So the commercial side, the offshore wind, the offshore oil and gas is good, steady business, nice growing business. But it won't move the needle and as much as the defense industry does for us as a company. And maybe that's a good segue into saying that our defense business is more product focused versus our commercial business is more services focused. And so what I mean by that is, the Canadian Navy example, that $50 million contract, about 40 of that is delivery of hardware and spares and training to the Canadian Navy over a 2-year period. And then the remaining 10 million is a 5-year support contract where we provide additional training and additional spares and support activities. And that's an example of one particular Navy. Go back to the Danish Navy a couple of years ago, and we won it was around a $35 million contract for the Danish Navy for our catfish product. And in that case, we were delivering 4 systems plus spares to the Danish Navy. Same thing with the Polish Navy. We've won about $15 million worth of business with them. And usually you get delivery over a 1 to 2 year period, followed by some ongoing service and support business. So those 3 different customers are all opportunities that have emerged in the last 3 years for us. But you can take those examples and you can copy and paste them in terms of opportunities in the friendly countries of Asia Pacific with a number of NATO-related navies. So there are more than a handful of $30, $40, $50 million defense bid opportunities that were either on multiple bid teams or some cases priming our own in the defense market. And we're not going to win them all, but we think we'll win our fair share, which will continue to provide the type of growth that we're seeing today. So that's on the defense side. And then on the commercial side, a lot of commercial customers don't want to buy a $5 million underwater drone. They just want the data. So they want somebody to provide them the service and then give them the data. And for the offshore oil and gas and the offshore wind space, that's effectively what we do. So a little bit of a different business model for that segment of the market. But it's the technology is obviously complementary to what we're doing on the product side of the business. But in effect, we're operating our own equipment for the customer, just providing them the data.
I've known you guys before, you were announcing, these $50 million contracts with the Canadian Royal Navy and, some of these other, even some on the smaller side, the $1 to $2 million contracts on the services side, and you guys announced on January 12th, 2023, now that you expect to report 40 million in 2022 revenue, up 56% year over year. I mean, Greg, in your opinion, you've been there since 2015, 8 years, you've seen the growth of this company. There's clearly an inflection point. In your opinion, what was it?
Two things I would say is one was the development of the catfish product, which we're starting to sell. We're starting to sell full complete systems as opposed to being reliant on other people's sales to sell a $500,000 sensor. And then the second thing has really just been the ramp of the upgrade cycle along with geopolitical events in the defense industry. So you've got this, industry wave that is happening on the defense side. And in addition to that, we've got the right technology at the right time. As I mentioned earlier, there's when we bid on a number of these programs, it's us and, maybe two, maybe three other companies that are competing. And the other ones are often large defense contractors. There's not a whole lot of new startups in the space. And many times these programs we will get pulled in. So, we might end up as a subcontractor, but a key technology provider to anybody from a Lockheed Martin to an Atlas Electronic to an Ultra Technologies. These are big European defense contractors. So that's really what the inflection point has been is moving upstream on the technology side, and then also the industry inflection point.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking of competitive landscape, you mentioned there's usually like one, two, maybe three other players that are in there. Can you give us a better understanding of who you're really competing against? And you kind of already talked about what your value prop is compared to them, but I'm just curious as to what that landscape looks like.
Yeah, and it's not one size fits all in terms of the competitive landscape. So if you think about our towfish product, which is effectively an underwater drone, which is still tethered to a ship, so it's got a power and cable data connection to the surface ship. Sorry. And in that case, our competitors are typically Northrop Grumman out of the US, but internationally, it is Thales, a large defense contractor out of France, or Echo Robotics, another defense contractor out of France. In the Danish Navy example, both Thales and Northrop Grumman were our two main competitors there, and we won that program. And we now have 4+ systems with the Danish Navy in the water, acting as a great reference customer for other naval opportunities. In the Canadian and Navy example, our competition was, as best we know, was Echo Robotics again, as well as General Dynamics out of the US, a large defense contractor in the US. And those are, everybody that I've mentioned so far are all big 10+ billion, 50,000 employee type companies. So that's generally where we end up to go to market for our product.
Absolutely. Well, I guess one quick follow-up, you like I said, you did mention the value prop when kind of they're evaluating your bid versus the Lockheed and some of these bigger names. But I mean, do they tend to go by, because they work with Lockheed on so many other projects, right? There and some of these other firms. So I'm sure there's a bit of like glad handing behind the scenes of like, hey, take on this project, or if you take on this or that. I mean, I don't want to assume that's the case, and yet you're still going up and competing against that. How do you, in your mind, think, all right, well, I know this might be happening behind the scenes, but how do we continue to try and win?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it comes down to providing the customer a solution that is
Because it's not price. They got the money.
It's providing a solution that provides the highest quality data, provides great area coverage rates. So what I mean by area coverage rate is you have the high resolution data, and you're able to capture all that in a shorter period of time, which means that the ships are out there for a shorter period of time, ultimately saving customers money. So if we have technology that does provide the high performance, is very user friendly. Historically, this type of technology required a bunch of PhDs out there in the field to operate that. So we spent a lot of time in terms of developing the user interfaces to make the technology easier to use. Spend a lot of time in terms of training customers, and a lot of times a lot of effort in our customer support group to really provide a complete solution to the end customer. We're smaller, we're nimble, we can add features quicker than some of these big companies will. We react quicker. Customer support is front and center for us. So typical, David versus Goliath type of activity. And but still, when you peel back the layers of the onion, if you think about some of our large defense contractor competitors, still they might be a 50,000 employee company, but as it relates to the underwater domain and mine hunting technologies, really, you might be talking about a 250 person group is competing against 1,000 person group, that type of thing. So that's really how we compete in the market. And the other point I would say is, well, we're a relatively small company in terms of underwater acoustic expertise and underwater geoscience expertise, artificial intelligence, machine learning experts. We have, we've got world-class people that, while we might be based in Canada, have joined our company from places in Europe and from in the US and South America, and we're relatively well known within our industry and entrepreneurial, and people want to come work with us. So that's how we compete against the big companies.
Gotcha. One other question on the business side is, specifically on defense commercialization side, that's kind of, just, I mean, you're not as, it doesn't seem like you're as restricted in terms of like what sectors within that might have a use case for your products and services. But on the defense side, when you're thinking about which, jurisdictions you might want to work with, I mean, do you think about that when you're putting bids out there? Because I'm sure you might get inquiries from all over the place, not just Canada, the US, and maybe some NATO countries.
We are the way to describe it is
EU countries. I meant EU countries.
We work with all the I'll call it the NATO friendly, the US friendly, the Five Eyes countries. We don't do business with China. We don't do business with Russia. And on our board of directors is Admiral Mike Connors, and Mike retired from the Navy 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. And his last posting, he ran the U.S. The nuclear submarine fleet. With his background and with the industries that we play in, we deal with the friendly countries that are our allies, and there's definitely certain countries that we stay clear from.
Very good. All right. So, like I said, now like 3 or 4 times, I've known you for a long time. I've known Kraken Robotics for a long time. You've kind of done the dog and pony show. You've gone to all the conferences, done the one-on-ones, the whole bit. Even after maybe somebody sees your presentation, maybe does a one-on-one with you, what have investors still told you that they get confused about when thinking about Kraken Robotics? And maybe we can address that right now.
Yeah, I think historically the comments have been, the business is lumpy. And, we we're a relatively small company. If you go back, we've gone the last 3 years from 12 million to 26 million to 40 million for 2022. And for 2023, we put out guidance next month when we report year-end results. We'll show, very solid, continued solid growth. But a lot of times, public company, you get looked at on a quarterly basis. And even when we would do a $26 million revenue year, you might have had, 70% of that business weighted in the second half of the year, of which, 40% of your year happened in the fourth quarter. So historically, it's been lumpy. Now, I would say what's changed now is the fact that we've won some of these bigger programs, and they're multi-year programs. That lumpiness is coming out of the business, and just there's so many. The pipeline of activity is so much broader and bigger than it has been in the past, that we're hopeful that people start to realize that 12 million goes to 26, goes to 40, goes to a nice growth level again the next year and the next year and the next year. And people can start to see it more by recognizing the various big opportunities that are out there. The one other thing I think is we've had a bit of a collection of technologies historically as well, and I think we've really tried to focus and say some of these R&D efforts are less important to us. Let's focus on the areas that we're really strong at. So if you think of us today, we are sensors, we are underwater drones, and we are subsea batteries on the services side, on the product side, and then you add in the services business. So really, key three or four areas which drive the business forward, and it will make it easier for people to really understand the Kraken story and what drives the financial results.
Absolutely. All right. So my next question is one I ask every CEO on here, despite, cracking, you cracking the code, that is terrible. I might even take that out. That was a terrible joke. but hitting some of these inflection points that, you hope to achieve with the company, year over year sequential revenue growth. But in your opinion, what would you say are some of the company's downside risks that you want folks to better understand?
Yeah, to be clear on what the challenges are in the business. So I guess that, you talk about downside risks. There's still some challenges left over from COVID and supply chain. The people environment has been a battle for the last couple of years. Challenging hiring people. It's still a tight labor market, given all the macro things that have happened recently. The expectation is that the labor market will eventually, come our way. But, operating right now as, we've got lots of job openings and we can't fill them as quick as we want to. So that's been a challenge. That's a risk on your ability to execute on the business that you do have. Other areas, there's still some various electronic components that are tough to get and have long lead times. And if you look at our catfish and components that are inside it, there's gyros, there's power boards, power supply boards. There's a number of different components that are similar to what might go in a rocket, of which there's lots of rockets and lots of missiles being manufactured out there today. So, all our technology is used for defensive purposes, not offensive purposes, but still getting some of those components is a challenge. And so those are sort of, I call them micro challenges to us that we manage. Probably the big picture items that keep us up at night is, we do have big competitors with big balance sheets. And if a competitor ever wanted to, lose money on a particular subsea program to squeeze out a smaller competitor out of the market. They have the balance sheet to do that, because they're probably making lots of money in their space division or their tank division or things like that. So I mean that's always a risk, but overall, as I mentioned earlier, it's not all about price. Price is clearly a factor, but it's about performance. It's about customer support. It's about providing the customer user-friendly technology. And so even if a competitor did do one of those pricing, be very, very aggressive on pricing, we think we have other features why we'll still win our fair share of business. Those are probably the three most notable things.
For sure. When we talked about the geopolitical tailwind, because that sounds like that was like probably the primary tailwind that really saw much more interest in Kraken and your technology. Is there any risk associated with let's say the geopolitical tailwind calms down a little bit, or there's just, is there anything to think about there? Or are we in this world now where like that's just at the forefront, like you need to be thinking about all aspects of defense?
Yeah, and we don't want to sound like we're beating the war drums or war mongering, because nobody.
Don't worry, I didn't get that at all. Trust me.
Yeah. But the reality is, if you look at the last 30 years, it's been a lot. Middle East, the war on terrors, land-based wars, and it's not just Russia, Ukraine. The South China Sea, the global powers, whether it's the U.S. and China. This has been many years in the making, and there's a number of there's a number of different regions around the world which have been building up various capabilities, and the subsea domain is an area that has lagged behind in terms of investment. There's been a lot of money spent on tanks and airplanes, aircraft carriers, aerial drones, and going forward, the subsea is, as the technology has evolved, you're going to see a lot of increased activity. So, and same thing, if you think about, example, we just. This is I'm diverging here for a topic, but I'll bring it back in. If you think about the move over to electric vehicles from combustion engines, which is going to be a multi-year trend, and one of the hot topics you always hear about is we need all sorts of these battery metals, we need all sorts of way more nickel and copper and things that we can't mine today. Subsea mining, polymetallic nodules on the ocean floor is becoming an increasing area of exploration. So you got a number of commercial companies out there and a number of governments that are out there that are actually looking for these polymetallic nodules using underwater vehicles. And so there's the commercial side of that, but there's also the defense side of that. So you've got all these countries around the world which might have in their offshore areas, they might have very important minerals that they now care much more about than they might have paid attention to 25 years ago. So technologies like ours would be used to find some of these minerals, and that's how you end up with even if the geopolitical situation calmed down, you're still going to have all these various search for resources in the subsea domain that will keep demand pretty robust.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I only got a couple more questions for you today, but in your opinion, What is your vision for the company in 3 to 5 years? And what would you say are those inflection points that'll get you there?
Yeah, our vision, I mean, overall over the next 3 to 5 years and just for the foreseeable future is we're really about transforming the future of subsea intelligence. So providing the technologies, whether it's underwater drones or underwater batteries that power people's underwater drones or very high-end sensors, it's making this technology more useful, so that our customers know everything about an area of the world that very little is known today, the subsea. So helping our clients explore, power, and protect the planet. That's our vision. And so we're going to continue to do what we're doing, stay on the leading edge of innovation, and continue to supply our complete system solutions to both defense customers around the world as well as commercial customers around the world. And just two areas that I haven't really touched on too much that I just want to make sure that we do talk about. On the commercial side of the market, a lot of people in North America aren't that familiar with offshore wind, but it is big in Europe and it's big in Asia Pacific. And you're going to see and hear a lot more about it in the U.S., both on the East Coast and eventually the West Coast as well. And really, our technologies allow customers to see what's buried in the seafloor or on the seafloor. So when they go to drill in these large offshore wind turbines, they're de-risking their development of those programs because our technologies provide that seabed intelligence. So offshore wind, while not a product sale end market, is going to be a good growth driver to the business. And on the battery side, we talked about it a little bit, but one of the things that's happening in the market is we provide our batteries to subsea autonomous vehicles. So they could be as small as 150,000 or 150 pound drone that gets put in the water by one or two people, to ones that are the size of a school bus. And the ones that are the size of the school bus might do a variety of missions, a lot of clandestine stuff. And that's a segment of the market that is really just starting to emerge now that didn't exist a few years back. And what that means to a company like Kraken is it means rather than selling $1 million of battery per underwater vehicle, we might be selling $6, $7, $8 million per battery, or sorry, per underwater vehicle. And some of our customers are becoming emerging players in that space. And as a result, tying it all back together, as we look forward, 3 to 5 years from now, we expect to be a multiple of revenues from where we are today, and really driven by system sales like catfish and battery sales into the defense market, as well as offshore wind on the services side. So that's it. Hopefully we're still doing what we're 3 to 5 years from now, we're still having the success, but at a much larger level, providing innovative solutions and very leading technology and fun to work on for our people, and important technology to our customers. So we say internally, what we do matters. So we're helping our customers explore, power, and protect the planet. And obviously the protection of the planet and national security issues is dear to a lot of people's hearts.
Absolutely. My final question for you before I let you go here today, even though you've been with the company since 2015 as CFO and COO, you just recently there was management transition to you now as CEO of the company. Tell us about that experience, and I guess what the plan is in terms of now as CEO, if there's anything else to report there.
Yeah, so that happened. I mean, that had been 6+ months in the making, and officially happened the beginning of 2023. To us, it's business as usual. The last couple of years, we like to say we've been battle hardened by the challenges of COVID and running a manufacturing business during COVID. So we've got a hardened team. We've got a lot more depth to the team than we've had in the last. If we look where we were 3-4 years ago. And my job now is to set the strategy and is to make sure I have the right people in place to help us execute the strategy. And from that point of view, I think we have a great team now. It was never just Carl Kenny, and it's not never just Greg, or it's not just Greg Reid. There's from public facing point of view, there's that the investors might only see a couple of us, but there's a lot of experience, depth behind the scenes, running a complicated business in a complicated world with some cool technology, and we've got a nice margin business and lots of great growth opportunities in front of us. So business as usual, and let's continue to execute on the opportunity in front of us.
Let's go. Well, Greg, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can our audience go and find more information on Kraken Robotics?
Our website is www.krakenrobotics.com, and we have a lot of good content on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So all the social media channels, we usually have some good content there, and happy to take calls, answer emails anytime. Look forward to seeing folks at the conference, at the Las Vegas conference in April.
That's right. All right. Well, Greg, thank you so much again for joining me. Really do appreciate it. Good luck. Stay safe. And I'll see you in Vegas.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not provided as financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or an offer to buy or sell any securities or make any investment. The views expressed by guest speakers are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement thereof by SNN or its affiliates. SNN expressly disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this podcast.